That's right. Your choices are very limited, and so your choices become inner choices. And the ones who take those inner choices go very deep, as you know from that book and letters and people I've met. And now Kenny Johnson, someone who was at those early meetings, has formed his own prison program and goes into prisons and speaks with juveniles. And he was somebody who'd been in and out of prison since he was, I think, 15 years old. He was, a hardened guy, and he opened up. And the news for us is that we have no excuse,
Yes.
And that's very good news, because we tend to make excuses, to postpone things, well, I'm not good enough, or I don't meditate enough, or I still have negative thoughts. And we use that to keep ourselves in prison, rather than just opening up to what is innocent and pure and free right now.
I think the interesting thing is now these days too, that deep openings are happening to people that have done nothing before in their life.
Yes.
And they're coming in they're not coming in a subtle way, they're coming in such a dramatic way that they have to look, because either they have to look or they end up in the mental hospital, one or the other. There's no halfway house with them. And I guess that's again an extension of what we were talking about earlier, is about the ordinary awakening is here. And it's coming, and somehow consciousness is just wham, it's random, isn't it?
Yes, it seems random to me. We could call it grace or luck, but it's definitely beyond any notion of practice or karma or good or bad. It's a spark that has spread. It's a prairie fire.
So my process with you is interesting, because I haven't really looked at my notes. I have a few questions, and I'm just waiting for the next question to arise, and one hasn't arisen this time, so I have to tell you that. So as I haven't got
That's
a question
nice.
at the moment, I'm looking at the clock. We've got about 8 minutes left, so we're not there yet. I realise it's powerful looking at you, and I can hear there's a train somewhere in the background, and I'm realising it's also a television programme, so it'll be good to get something to move it into something that we can talk about.
I remember when that has happened on radio sometimes, where there's been a moment of silence, and at first the interviewer on the radio show said, "Oh, we're not allowed to have any dead space," and so then we actually discussed, was that dead space, or was it a live space? And it was actually a very full space. So maybe on television, how extraordinary and revolutionary to have moments of nothing happening but life.
I know you do. I just sneaked a little look at my notes. So it says this is actually it's good to bring this up now, because you had at one point a desperation to escape the void.
Did I say that?
Empty of desperation to escape the void, empty of hope and life and spirit, that I secretly feared was my true face. But anyway, it doesn't matter.
Oh, I can relate to it,
Yeah.
I don't remember writing that, but because I'd had many moments, actually, of just feeling that if I looked inward, it was really bad news. That I could have a facade of happiness, I knew how to look right and be friendly, but if I was by myself, alone, and really exposed myself to myself, I sensed this murky, maybe abyss is not the right word, but just this area of lostness and damage, like a wound. People speak of their wounds, and this felt like an essential wound. It felt like a soul wound, like something was deeply wrong with me, and it, of course, like most people, I thought it was just me, that everybody else was basically healthy, and if they looked inward, they would find the light. But when I looked inward, I found what was dark, and so maybe that's where the moment of courage really came, just a willingness to go all the way into that, because it felt like it was endless, And it felt like, no, this is really the truth of myself. And so it was a willingness, well, if this is the truth of myself, then I want to know that. And to go all the way into that. And then what that is really is consciousness has somehow separated, and there's this object of darkness and unknowability, and consciousness remerges with that, and in a sense shines a light into that. And it was less than a second then. It was open and free. Whereas most of my life it had been there is something to haunt me. I didn't often go into it. In fact, maybe that's what precipitated those early experiences of being 6 years old and trying to avoid that, and so leaving my body in a certain sense. But the willingness to, and maybe willingness is too strong a word, not exactly willing, but nevertheless meeting it and discovering that that meeting itself is a kind of communion and an integration with all aspects of myself. And that darkness then is not there. It was an illusion, but it was a wound illusion, but it was not a real wound.
Yeah.
It only was real when I wasn't looking at it. It only had power when I wasn't willing to go into the core of it. And of course I had a story to support it. I had proof of why I was wounded and the results of that wounding. But when I actually met it as an energy, it was liberated.
No,
it was released.
Yeah.
Huh.